All right, and so our historical journey continues. Today we are at Fort DeSoto. I haven't done a video here in 3 years. A lot has changed in the factor in that case, but we are here at Fort DeSoto State Park, a historical site. We'll get to the fort later, but right now we're going to head on into the museum, check it out, read on some historical information about the fort and what battle took place here at Fort DeSoto. So, without any other interruptions, let's get right on to it. Head on into the. Alright, so right away we are going into the early history of the islands at Fort DeSoto. It was known as La Florida. The first Spanish explorers named the state coastline, the longest coastline of any state in the continental U.S. Its location and control immediately became important to the first Europeans come to the New World. But taming and colonizing this peninsula turned out to be an impossible task for both Spain, who controlled Florida for nearly 300 years, and England, who claimed Florida for more than 30 years. So here's kind of the set up of, as you can see here, this is like modern day peninsula of the Gulf of Mexico, the Tampa Bay. There's the Skyway Bridge. You can see in modern day, you got Tampa here, where you go across. Of course, here, this is where I came from. This way, I came across the Skyway Bridge, Sunshine Skyway Bridge, and came here, veered off. That's where Clearwater, that's where I'm going, that's where we'll be later tonight. But as you come down, you go Skyway Bridge over here, and then kind of we are right here. This is where Fort DeSoto is, right here, as you can see. Fort DeSoto Military Reservation. That's where the soldier hole is. You got St. Christopher Key, Madeline Key, Bon Fortune Key, St. Jean Key, Mullet Key. And a lot of these actually are like you can actually take ferry boats to the, I don't know if it's to the fort or if it's somewhere on an island. But these are before history books were written. 12,000 years ago, you are now standing between 40 and 70 miles from the water we now call the Gulf of Mexico. There were no barrier islands at this location. Much of the world's fresh water was trapped in the polar ice caps, and sea level was 150 feet below the current levels. Large animals like the woolly mammoth, saber-toothed cat, 6-foot-long armadillo, like creature called the galoptodont, roamed through the area. Prehistoric humans, we call the Paleo-Indians, wandered over the land, hunting these animals with stone-tipped spears, and may have had an extinction of some. So now we can go when the explorers arrived. When Tampa Bay was explored by Piniflo de Nevares in 1528 and by Hernando de Soto in 1539, they called it Espiro Santo Bay, Bay of the Holy Spirit. However, Tampa Bay was not scientifically surveyed until Francisco Maria Celis detailed 1757 survey of area's timber resources for Spanish Navy, which produced the first accurate charts of Tampa Bay. Celis gave Egmont Key its first name as Isla de San Blas y Beretta. Spanish surrendered possession of Florida to the British in 1763. So in 1752, in time of history, Benjamin Franklin flew a kite in a thunderstorm to show the lightning was a form of electricity. He did that here? Huh. I didn't even know that. That's interesting. And then in 1757, nation's first streetlights were used in Philadelphia. while whale oil lamps designed by Franklin were installed on a few city streets. All right. Okay, so this was the map of Tampa Bay made by Thomas Jeffries, cartographer to His Majesty King George III. So this is kind of what he pictured of Tampa Bay to look like back in 1767. Of course, here in the Spanish-American War, you got lasted from April until December 1898. Became known as America's most popular war. This war united the northern and southern states after the Civil War and thrust the United States into the role of a major military power. First time ever the United States was viewed by the rest of the world as an imperialistic nation. Definitely feared by many other countries. Of course, the United States overall power next to Russia, which back then in the 1800s was the Soviet Union, and 1900s. It was back in Soviet Union, which is now modern day Russia, and that is the overall superpower of the whole world. Where the United States of America is second compared to Russia now, so above the military bases. But back to the Spanish-American as total, the Spanish-American had a major impact on Tampa Bay area and the Pinellas Peninsula in Pinellas County, which is we're in St. Petersburg. In 1898, populations of Tampa and St. Petersburg were only a fraction of what they are today. Arrival of 30,000 Army troops for training, outfitting, and embarkation to Cuba changed the character of the Tampa Bay area forever. Then it was by 1897, after numerous uprisings and armed revolts in Cuba, the sympathies of the American people have been aroused. And in January of 1898, after a serious riot in Havana, the U.S. sent the warship USS Maine to protect Americans living in Cuba. Then on February 15th of 1898, USS Maine exploded in Havana Harbor, and the Spanish-American War had begun. The war, however, was not officially declared until 2 months later. Wow. So this right here, I'm just going to give a brief summary. Basically, getting ready to go there. Once the USS Maine was struck by a torpedo and shot down in Havana, Cuba. That was when the Spanish-American War started an uprising, and then 2 months later, we were at war with Cuba. Basically, in the Spanish. But going down towards the end of the war here, in conclusion of December 10th of 1898, a peace treaty was signed in Paris, France, ending the Spanish-American War. In the agreement, Spanish ceded the islands of Cuba, Puerto Rico, and Guam to the United States. Spain also ceded the Philippine Islands to the U.S., but U.S. agreed to payment of $20 million as compensation to the Spanish government. And so here we go. This is them signing the peace treaty. So it was after the Spanish-American War that Tampa and the military armed forces started to come together and start the industrialization industry, basically for building ammo, working on different planes, military planes, some of the railroad, and other types of transportation, especially ships, warships, and doing maintenance work on those ships after the war had ended so that they could keep job and at peace with the Spanish. So a little bit a little bit of that history there as the war came to a close, and most of it was. Uh, and then, of course, as we get into the women and children, uh, they uh, they began to thrive, and as the men returned home, were helping out in the household as well. And, and a lot of them were doctors. Women were doctors, nurses, who took care of the injured soldiers during the war. And in November, or I'm sorry, in June of 1910, Fort DeSoto garrison, the 39th Company, was transferred to Fort Morgan, Alabama, and the fort became an inactive sub-post of Fort Dade, with a caretaker detachment in charge until 1914. Then, on August 31st of 1921, Fort Dade was deactivated, and all personnel except the 18-man caretaking detachment were transferred to Key West. And of course, a lot of it was. This is kind of some just overview of what had happened during the Spanish-American War and them working on warships. And then, behold, once World War I started the approach and the detail reached its maximum size, 2 officers, 22 enlisted men in October of 1917. Same year, detachment assembled 4 of the Martyrs for shipment to Fort Rosecrans, California. During the war to end all wars, new battleships were improved aiming techniques and higher trajectory weapons steamed into combat. Their gun range also surpassed most American coastal armament, and their high trajectory neglected the effectiveness of the concrete walls and hidden gun batteries. Coastal protection, a shift of railroad artillery, which was mobile and adaptable to changing needs. And they began to, in 1941, they officially became Mullet Key Bombing Range, a token force Company A of the 110th Engineer Aviation Battalion, camped on the island to maintain the range and work on providing an auxiliary landing strip. And these were some of this was literally a torpedo that was used in World War I, or practice bomb. Alright, so a lot of history inside this small museum. I like it. Now it's time to go back outside in the heat, unfortunately, because it feels so good in here. But we need to look around on the trailhead and go through the trail, and then of course the last thing is we'll visit the fort, and then pick up a snack too, because I'm hungry. So let's go ahead and venture onto the trailhead. We have made it on the trailhead. The original building foundations were located in volunteers and park staffing 1911 prints. The footers or brick piers that you see along this trail were reconstructed on the original foundations by park staff and Eagle Scouts. Foreign foundations were buried in the sand and required excavation before the brick piers could be reconstructed. Brick road and portions of the concrete curb and sidewalks are original. Please use caution on the trail due to uneven surfaces in certain areas. That just talks about how the ones. Alright, so here, the Quartermaster Storehouse. First one. It was responsible for procuring and issuing supplies for the fort. This was an 833 square foot frame building with a cypress shingle roof constructed at a cost of $190. $190. Wow, that's cheap. It was expensive back in those days, but cheap now. And then, so this part talks about the 1900s how it was overpopulated. Fort DeSoto was overpopulated by mosquitoes, and the troops couldn't even enjoy the beaches because of the mosquitoes kept biting and festering and bothering them. Post quartermaster gave his report on 1908. Ooh. So I guess early in the 1900s was rough for these troops that couldn't even enjoy a day at the beach because of the mosquitoes infestation. That's terrible. But here's a little what stood here is the bakehouse. Was construction in 1900 and cost of $1,557 and had 619 square feet of floor space. This 3-room frame building, also a slate roof, 1 wash sink, and supplied all baked goods for the fort. So you could see kind of where it was laid out. This was the foundation right here, and of course around with the bricks was the framework, and it was built on these little brick stones. There we go. So there were 2 civilian quarters at Fort DeSoto, 2-story, 1,062 square feet frame building with slate tin roofs, 5 rooms, one I can't even read that, with indoor plumbing, 1 bathroom. Wow. Officers' quarters are visible in the background on the left. There it is. So this was one of the civilian quarters, which was like basically a house. And but here you can see the framework. Of course, the bathhouse was on the left, which over there, and many others. And also framework. I can't believe they had 1 bath in that big, what was a big house. It's crazy. All right, made it to our next stop at this sewer system. This was a sewer system that was made and drained into the Gulf of Mexico and in the Tampa Bay. There's 6 and 8-inch pipes. It installed at a cost of $3,426. The structure in front was a flush tank. There were 4 of these located on the post. There was a constant flow of water into the flush tank and then through the sewer lines to keep the sewage flowing properly. So it's basically just a giant sewage tank. And this was used, of course, for disposing waste. Of course, I'm not going to go through all of these right here because it would take so much time, and I don't want to bore you with this type of story. I'm basically letting you guys kind of picture in your mind of what it looked like back in the 1800s during the Spanish-American War. And we are on the waterfront. Hey, look. But no, mostly this type of content is basically for of course, the historical part of it, and locating each house and each building would take up a lot more time just to talk about each one. When we were just in the museum and basically did a whole summary of the Spanish-American War and what Fort DeSoto Fort played a role in that type of war. So, but right here we're at the officers' quarters. Pause. It was 1900, constructed in 1900, cost of $5,529 each. The 3 identical buildings each had 2,938 square feet of living space, photograph was taken in 1905. 10-room frame building had a slate roof with 2 bathrooms. This was it right here. This is where it was, because you see the 6 frames on each side, the 6 pillars of brick on each side, plus the 2 in the front to hold up the base, and the 3 in the back to hold up the back frame. Definitely got to talk about the captain's quarters, because he was the main one that guided the ships from Cuba and imported and started the Spanish-American War. So it was the captain's quarters, constructed in 1905, cost of $9,492. 2-story frame building, slate roof, had 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, servants' quarters, a kitchen, sewing room, parlor, library, and formal dining room. A total floor area of 4,770 square feet. Photograph was taken in 1906. The administration building is visible on the right side. So this is how big the captain's quarters was. It basically was a mansion house. I believe it. That's definitely, and that's a mansion back in that time period. Of just, it was quadrupled the size of any normal house that was here along the beach side. So right here was the mine storehouse. The reason I had this one on deck was because it was the only building at the fort with wooden pillars as the foundations, and it was the photograph here taken in 1907, and it had cypress shingle roof and wood floors. Total floor area was 1,500 square feet, and was 2 stories and 7 rooms. So this is where it stood. So this right here, what I'm walking on, is the original brick that was laid out during the 1900s. Late 1800s, 1800s, 1900s, before cement and pavement came into play. It was more of a brick roads. And this is what a lot of the driveways looked like into each house that we were able to see today. And but a lot of it was constructed in the 1900s, early 1900s, 1901, 1907, through that time period, where they had them along the coastline in the Gulf. And so now we're going to make our way towards the fort. I'm going to go to the snack bar first before that, so I can get something, something to snack on. And then go to, and I'll probably eat something a little bit heavier later, but snack bar, and then we're going to head on to the main attraction, the fort of Soto. Alright, so right now I'm in one of the bunkers, the fort. I'm actually in the fort now, and this is one of the bunkers where the soldiers would hide out in protecting themselves from the enemy, which was the Spanish at the time. And during the Spanish-American War, American civilians would hide out in these bunkers, and you can see like they have beds. These are slabs, and they looked like they were beds at one point, but the beds were taken out, and this is where they would sleep in the night. And of course there were gates on the doors. They're not now, but there were gates that would open and close as they as they left. You can see here, there were beds right there by the window. That's probably not safe. And there was also a bed in here. And then you can see where the gate would have been. Really creepy. Of course, you can see the blood stain. You can make out a figure in this blood stain here. It looks like someone was shot right here. Also, the dry blood stains over here. Just explosion of blood in here. You can see kind of bullet holes. Some of the bullet holes right here. These two look like eyes. And then when you come into a secluded area like this and go a little bit deeper into the fort, it really does kind of get creepy. But right over here, one of the artillery guns. Ow, hit myself with a tree. So this is how one of the artillery guns works, where you have a 6-inch bare bent carriage, plain with roof of shield removed, 40 caliber gun. This is kind of how it works. You have the elevation here of the angle of the guns, where you can do a 70-degree or a 16-degree angle. Depends on where you want to aim at. And in this case, it looks like, of course, it's painted over, but this was an active cannon at one point during the Spanish-American War, when the Americans were at war with the Spanish. Of course, you can see how big this baby is, and it could fire, and it was loud. They would always cover their ear from one side whenever they shot it off, and it could go pretty good. It could go about 12 rounds a minute, which is very, very impressive when you think of how big of a gun cannon this was. And so, we got some other ones over here as we keep looking, and we can eventually go up onto the fort, and we'll make it there. So these guns right here, cannons that were aimed up, one's aimed right at me. That's not good. But these were 12-inch Seacoast Martyr model, 1890s. They were, fortification is the Battery Laidley, in honor of Colonel Theodore Laidley, who served in the Mexican and Civil Wars, died in Florida. August 1902, 8 Martyrs were mounted. However, weapons were not test-fired until November 19th and 20th of 1903, 5 years after the fort's foundations were laid. The Martyrs stood ready to defend the harbor of Tampa Bay, but never fired a shot at an enemy. The only time they were fired was during practice. So the length overall was 161 inches. Muzzle to breech was 141 inches. That means basically from the top of the cannon, the barrel of the cannon, to the base. The bottom part of the cannon was the breech. And maximum diameter, 12.5 inches. Total weight, 138,000 pounds. Hydraulic was the mechanism type. Length of recoil, 23 inches. Recoil, I meant. Recuperating mechanism, 5 columns. Maximum elevation was 70 degrees. Minimum was 45. Traverse was 360 degrees, so it could turn all the way around. Maximum range was 6.82 miles. So this cannon, could fire and it would travel 6 miles. That's pretty impressive. And you can see how big of a gun this was, and the hydraulics. Of course, they would use the pedal system, how they would do it, they would press down here and then crank the wheel. I can't turn it, one, because it's hot, and two, it's bolted down and painted over, so you can't turn the wheel. But they would do that, load the ammo in. You can see down the barrel of the gun, and then you would aim it at wherever you want to go to, and it would, and then you'd light the fuse, and kaboom. I really wish I knew what this was, of some type of device, mechanical device. It looked like it was used on a warship or one of the ships. And come back here. This is terrifying. This is really, all right. So we are in one of the bunkers here. Of course, I don't know if you'll be able to see any stains in this one as we did the last one, but this is scary, kind of, but I like it. Alright, so now that we have finished our ice cream, time to climb up these stairs. We are going to be on top of the fort. Just do a little overview of the fort before we have to go, because we have to get back to our next spin venture tonight. Cannot wait to show that to you. We are now on top of the fort. Oh, some stairs. But very cool. So you can look at Mexico. Very pretty, clear blue water. I bet that water is warm. Saw on the news where the Gulf water temperature was 90 degrees. That's hot for water. But this is the fort. So you can look out over the water and over to the island. Right over there. The pier sets down there. But, overview of the fort. We are high up. The wind is dead. It's very hot. Very hot. But let's take some. So, a lot of the viewpoints that we're able to see on top of the fort are what it would look like back in the 1800s when the fort was first established and built during the Spanish-American War and was used during the Spanish-American War. It is where on top of the fort would be a lot of the cannons and artillery weapons used that go with that go on top of the fort. So anyway, we're making our way back down now. I knew that wouldn't take that long, and so like I said, making our way back down. My car is right over there in the shade, so that helps. And we will be go ahead and make our trek over to Clearwater. It's our next destination. Drive over there. It's about an hour drive from here. Didn't realize how far that was until I looked. But yeah, we're gonna make our way over there. Thank you guys so much for watching this Spin Venture here at Fort DeSoto. Be sure to subscribe to Spin Ventures. Drop a like on the video. As always, for history buffs, you like American history, world history, any type of history, Florida history, that's what I do. And leave comments down below. And don't forget, I created another YouTube channel. It's called, it's, my word, I just lost my train of thought. It's called Caught in a War Zone. That is going to be my new historical channel of old forts, historical places, battlefields around the state of Florida, and possibly into Georgia. Who knows? But yeah, I'll put a link into that down below so y'all could subscribe to that channel as well. Would love it. Help out the channel, both my channels, in order to keep going and putting gas in my car. No, but anyway, and more enjoying of what I do. And going to these different places. So, yeah. Thank you all for watching. And we will see you all on the next Spin Venture.